Good morning and welcome to Storytime, Sensory Storytime, in person and virtually for autistic and sensory challenged students. I'm Deborah Villegas. I have a little intro, so we'll go ahead and skip that. I just want to note that all of the resources and tidbits are all on Padlet for you. That's in the chat. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I also gave you my email. All right, before we do start though, I want to emphasize that I am not an expert. I have no extended learning in learning disabilities or behaviors. I just wanted to make that clear, but I have been a TA and a one-to-one. All right, a little bit about me. My name is Deborah Villegas. I live in Temecula, California. I'm from Riverside, California, not too far away from Temecula, about an hour or so. I graduated with art history and a religious studies master's at UCR and Cal State Long Beach. I stepped away from the library so that I can finish raising my daughter, who's now 25 years old, and finish school because I was a late bloomer. But when I tried to come back to work, I wasn't able to find a job. So I started a one-to-one position at a private school for autistic and learning disability students. And I later became a teacher's aide and stayed there for another year. And that was K-12. I worked from kindergarten all the way up to adults. It was quite challenging and quite the experience, but that's where I got my one-to-one experience working with this population. I always worked in the library, absolutely loved it as I was going through school. So I've worked in City College, I've worked with public, I've worked for UCR as a student supervisor, but I always missed the books and I missed the kids. And trying to come back to it was really difficult, even having a master's degree. And I'd like to share my story with everyone. I used to watch Jeopardy, well actually I still do, watch Jeopardy one day, and I was just staying at home, trying to finish raising my daughter and going to school, and I couldn't remember who wrote Peter Pan. And I started crying, literally. I was so frustrated because I could see it on the shelf, but I couldn't remember who wrote it. And my boyfriend just looked at me and he's like, "What are you doing? What is wrong with you?" And I said, "I think I really need to go back to the library." He's like, "I don't care what you have to do, just figure it out." And so I had to start all over again. I started as a page, I started as putting the books away and working circulation desk, and then later came back to the school. So that's why I'm here. I'm at a K through 5 elementary school in Temecula, and I see roughly about 800 students Monday through Friday when we are on campus. Virtually, it has cut down quite a bit. So why sensory story time? Do you have students who aren't able to focus and have a hard time staying on task? Are they disruptive, sensitive to loud noises, and unable to sit still? If you recognize these behaviors, then you're in the right session. This is from the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. 1 in 6 children, wow, that's a lot. 1 in 6 children are diagnosed with some form of ASD or autism spectrum disorder between the ages of 3 to 17, and the numbers are growing. So what is ASD? The autism spectrum disorder is growing, and it includes characteristics ranging from depression, OCD, ADHD, and gifted children. They all fall under this spectrum. And that's something to think about. How it affects our environment, how it affects us at the grocery store, in the mall, in public places, and in the library. Let's be real. In our positions as librarians, techs, and aides, we are not trained to work with ASD populations, and we probably won't be. I'm hoping that'll change. I'm really trying to be an advocate for that, knowing that this population exists and we need help. Hopefully after this session, you will leave with tools you can apply to your own special needs students and staff immediately. Traditional story times often exclude the ASD populations, however, that is changing. Having a plan is vital in our success. So where do we start? Our first starting point is to understand what autism is, be flexible, and know it may not be as you imagine. And that was something I had to get used to. I'm a go-getter and I want to be successful. And there was many times where it just wasn't what I planned. And this is why I started researching and looking for more answers so that I can help my students and myself be successful. An overview for today is having a visual schedule, Know some basic sign language. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Where do we sit? In class and at home. Keeping it short. Make it interactive. Keep it small. Turn down the volume. And last, we'll take a look at what I do and how I apply these tips and tricks to my story times, in person and at home. So first, have a visual schedule. And what is a visual schedule? A visual schedule is a picture or a pet card that shows what's expected from the student. These pet cards are also on mobile devices for many nonverbal students. I had a hard time getting these. I had to reach out to the teachers, I reached out to my admin, and ultimately my speech therapist was the one that came through for me. I needed ones that pertained to the library, such as reading a book, having a seat, listening to music, or playing on the computer. And we actually are now starting to put these posters throughout our areas, like the playground. I have one here in the library and in classrooms because, as you know, devices die out. All right, knowing some basic sign language. It's helpful, but it is not necessary. I use baby sign language, which has been a huge help. I have a little example here if you'd like to see one. Oh, I apologize. There we go. Really super easy, not hard to understand or learn. Again, it's just basic ones. This one's my favorite. All done. I also find that when I'm doing my story times, many times I have to redirect them or redirect my students, especially the elopers, the ones that get up immediately. And sitting down is the one that they know best. Also, one of my favorite ones is stop. Stop. All right. Be prepared to repeat, repeating, repeating, repeating. You might feel like it's Groundhog Day, but that's part of the plan. Repeating is going to teach everyone, including the teacher's aides and the one-to-ones, what's expected of them. I'd like to remind you again, all of these resources are available on my Padlet. I have one for the Storytime books and for all of the information that you see here today. I also have a short video that I'll show you at the end of this session. All right, let's move on. Be prepared to sound like a broken record. That's okay, and that's the point. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Repeating will be the key to your success. Have a welcome song or an activity. I used to do bubbles. I now try to incorporate some type of song and dance with hand movements. There was a crocodile. It's very interactive. It has a lot of hand movements, and my kids know immediately that it's time to come and get the wiggles out. I will show a very brief tidbit of that at the end. It's a little long. I suggest 5 to 10 minutes max. After that, it might be too long for them. However, I have gone longer if I needed to, just kind of monitor the situation. But it also allows for all students to arrive to story time. Many times with ASD students, they might have behaviors that's keeping the whole group from coming, or maybe one child might be out in the playground having a behavior while the other students come in. So having some type of song and dance and activity allows for all the students to arrive and find their spot and get situated. Prior to distance learning, I did bubbles, I did a hello song, and I would allow the class to arrive and settle down. So where do we sit? In person, I've used carpet tiles, chairs, cushions, vinyl bean bags, or even hula hoops. And I'll be honest, the hula hoops were quite distracting. So we don't use them as often, but it did help with some of my students who stemmed. And that's having to do something all the time with their hands or with their mouth, maybe even their feet. Virtually, I've asked parents to take pictures of their students so they know what's expected of them and so that they have an area in their place that they're acquainted with. For example, take a picture in a room where they're seated in a chair. I do have one parent that has one area that's just for story time, and the door remains closed, and the student is able to walk around because he doesn't sit very nicely. But it allows them to walk around and still have story time. Of course, the hand signals sitting was always a really helpful one for me. I still use it now. I actually use it with some of my first and second graders too. This is my setup. I like to use a semicircle. I know I'm very privileged to have a smart board in this large of an area. I didn't always. I've only worked with technology for the last 3 years. Um, so I'm very much appreciative at the space that I have. But as you can see, I have a semicircle here, and I have teachers throughout, maybe one in the middle and one on both sides of the semicircle. This allows those students who STEM, meaning that they have to do something with their hands, their feet, or their mouth at all times, or maybe even get up and twirl around. It gives them some space to do that. And this is also where we do our song and dance. I use my pet cards on the smartboard. However, virtually, I've created this little pet card here. So we have 2 songs. We have a hello song. We do 2 little songs. We have our story time, a closing song, and then a goodbye song. And what I do when we're finished with that activity is I'll grab that one down just to show that we're all done. And again, if you need any of those pet cards, I have them for you. All right, keeping it short. So important. I have had to modify my story times to meet the needs of my population. However, I work with my teachers, my admin, and my speech therapists who have been all wonderful. I started out with 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then 30 minutes. And I am aware that not everyone has the capabilities or the staffing to work with a team to help get you through your story times. If it's possible, reach out to everyone. And that's how I ended up developing the story time plan for myself. I reached out to my principal, to my speech therapist, and they were all very helpful. I suggest if you have your students in the library longer than 30 minutes, then plan, plan, plan. Have different centers and activities, and if you don't have help or aides, do some activities a little bit longer. For example, I was short a couple of aides and I ended up playing Monster Mash 3 times during Halloween. But it was something that the students were able to connect with, enjoyed it, and we stayed with that song. Now, with virtual story times, I've had my struggles, but I monitor behaviors as best as I can and aim for 2 books to read, but most of the time it's 1 book. With virtual story times, I've put more song with hand movements for better interactions. So I've always done a welcoming song with sign language. It's Hello Friends, and I'll show you an example of that at the end of this slideshow. But it has sign language where they can use their hands as friends or hello and some time. It gives them some hand movement. I've learned it's the 5, is it 5 green speckled frogs or 5 speckled frogs sitting on a speckled log? Yeah, that's it. I've learned that song in sign language, and I do have an example of that. And after a while, it becomes quite fun. I encourage parents to use interactive games such as Starfall as an incentive for after story time. And that's something that we used as a center here. So the kids were familiar with it before we left for our extended COVID break. So then what do we do for the rest of the time? I try to make it as interactive as possible. I use a lot of books online. I record myself. I use YouTube. And this was prior to COVID, so it's something that the students are familiar with. I try to use very bright and colorful books on my Padlet. I do have resources to such books that are fun and interactive. And I use Starfall as an incentive. If you haven't used Starfall before, I highly recommend it. There is a free version of Starfall that allows students to go in. I usually do the ABC one since it's some type of reading related, and I do have a short video of one of my young ladies playing this game. It's really easy to use. I don't want to, I'll warn you, keep the volume down if it's too loud. We'll just go through one very quickly. And then they click onto the arrow so that they can go to the next little activity. So there is some reading involved and letters. I have this on my smartboard. However, I have had students in the past that are very familiar with the mouse. So I will put them on a computer with a mouse by themselves. And again, it's an incentive. It's something fun for them to do, and it allows them to work towards something. Keeping it small. Ideally, 5 to 8 is best, but again, let's be real. Some years I see up to 12 students at a time, K through 5. Are you PROACT trained? I recommend, if you are not, keep a hands-off approach. Now, PROACT training is a training that is meant to train to escape conflict by avoidance. And if you don't know what it is, it's just highly recommended that you just don't touch your students whatsoever. Many times we don't know what kind of behaviors our students have. Just from personal experience, I've been bitten, I've been punched, I've had chairs thrown at me, I've sat in things I don't want to mention. All of these things have happened to me. So being PROACT trained, even sometimes you get hurt. If you don't know your students' behaviors, let the aides deal with that. And that comes to, do you know how many one-to-one aides are per your students? And having a communication with your teacher for that. Ask the teachers, ask the aides, because they work with their students more than you do. They know what their behaviors are, so that you don't hurt yourself or get hurt or hurt others. Know which students have a one-to-one, and be sure that they come with your students every single time. Now, I've had some cases where the teacher didn't let all of the one-to-ones come to the library time, and that's not advised. So find out who needs a one-to-one and have them come every single time. I think I put this in another slide, but make sure that the aides know what's expected of them, and don't assume that they know what to do. Tell them what is expected. So for example, please go get your student, please go redirect your student. Or if you're doing song and dance and your student doesn't have movement, have your aide maybe dance with that student, since they know that student and it's okay for them to be touched. Before I do that though, all right, there we go. Turning the volume down. Many ASD children struggle with loud noises. Know who needs noise canceling headphones and have them bring them every single story time. This applies to at home and virtual story time also. My students in person will now ask me to help them put their headphones on. It's kind of like a security and a trust relationship. Give a heads up on what's coming. Okay, first we're going to do this. First, we're going to listen to the alligator song. Then we're going to listen to a story. And then after that, you will have our little breakout sessions. So for example, I start with my crocodile song. I always start with the low volume, and then I will increase it as we go further on the song, and if I ask permission and it's okay. Now, if you have verbal students that stem with their voice and like to scream and yell and shout, it's always good to try and communicate with them one-to-one and let them know that that hurts their ears, that it hurts your ears and it hurts your students' ears. It's very loud. After a while, that will be something that you can communicate with them and maybe redirect that behavior. I have my aides dance with their students. If you have a screamer or students, let them know. And most importantly, know when it's time to stop. Again, this was something that I have had to learn numerous times because I want to be so successful that I just keep pushing through. And sometimes it's just time to stop. Okay, you know what? Story time isn't working out right now. Now it's time to go to centers. That was the word I was trying to find earlier. All right, now it's time for my sensory overload. Many of you might have already seen this video. It's a video that is what it might feel like for an autistic person or sensory challenged person, what it might feel like in everyday normal. Please turn your volume down to start. and it's only about 2 minutes.
Deborah, is there supposed to be sound because we can't hear the sound?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I appreciate that. Let's try again.
Sorry.
No, I appreciate that. Let's see. Let's do the stop share very quickly, and then I'll try it again. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I've done that before, and you have to share, when you share your screen, you have to share with sound.
With sound.
It's at the little bot, it's at the very bottom.
Let's see if I can find my, there you are. That, yeah, you guys want to see that, huh? Okay, there we go. I was trying to expand my screen here. Share screen with audio. There we go. Let's try this one more time. Can you hear it? Does that sound better?
Yeah, we can hear it now.
Okay. All right. I thought it was very important to notice that she did not touch the student or the child. Super important that you don't just right away start touching the student or a child that's having behaviors unless you know their behaviors and you know the student. All right, let's move forward. Fidget toys. I used to use fidget toys, and prior to COVID, I would wash them after every story time. It is quite challenging, especially if you have story times back to back. They are very useful, but they can also be extremely distracting. I use them quite a bit for the students that have that need to have something in their mouth. And you'll see in one of my pictures, I do have a student that actually has one in his mouth. They have been thrown, they get thrown across the classroom, and I suggest them to parents. Some of them already might know of them and have them, but they can be distracting. I suggest that if you do see your students now and they're on campus now, keep an individual fidget box for each student. And if you don't have resources to get them, please ask the teachers because they have quite a bit resources for these things to come into the library for their students. Of course, you have to sanitize and wash them often. All right, so these are my resources. These are available on our Padlet. Again, I do have some visual task cards pertaining to the library if you need some or if you would like them. Please reach out and ask. I'm more than welcome or happy to share. These are works cited. This is all of the information that I used throughout this slideshow for you to have access to. Now putting it all together. So this is actually just a picture of me. I do use my pet cards on my smartboard for virtual story time at home. I learned how to sign the Froggy song, a very cute little song, and learn some sign language as I sing. This up here are some pictures that I took of the story, We Don't Eat Our Classmates. If you haven't already tried using shaving cream with paint, you put it into a little Ziploc bag and then you have a little bit of sensory without the mess. Wonderful. I've used it for snowmen. I've used it for this little video here. It is YouTube. It's found it on Pinterest, and this one was for a piggy story. I used one for dinosaur for We Don't Eat Our Classmates, and you can kind of see in here my little guy over here using something squishy that he brings with him every story time to stem. He decided to use his elbows also, and it's something that they get to take home, and they enjoyed it. Now, I do have permission for this session only to use this video of my students going through their centers after story time. I'll go ahead and show that now, and then I'll break down what I do for my smartboard. I'm going to go ahead and mute this. So, oh, that's all right. I'll talk over it. There we go. So this is our Duplo blocks section. This is our starfall section. My new smartboard does go up and down so it can accommodate my littles. I also use it for first and second grade, and many of the story times that I share with my SDC classes, I actually share with first and second grade. They love it, including the sign language songs. That is a one-to-one aid, and then this is my speech therapist. She comes in and does a little activity with them. On this day, we were doing snowmen and winter books. So she gets to spend a little bit more time with her students in the library. Thank you. I earned this space. I earned this space. It is a long time coming. And you can see some of my students have their headphones on. And now he's we do have to encourage them to go to another center, but most of the time we start out with the Duplo blocks. So that is my story time when we're in session. And then I also do my smartboard, which has worked out for me because then I just use it at home. Let me grab that for you very quickly. So on my smartboard, as my students are coming in, I will have this pet card up on the big screen and let them know that we're going to have our bubble time and music. And then we go straight into our little music story time here. I'm kind of I'm kind of scared to do it. It's very loud, actually. Let me see if I can find it on my. We'll go back. I think I have it connected here. I actually uploaded everything from my PowerPoint, so the links didn't come through. Let's see here. Where'd you go? Oh, there it is. All right. So I'm not going to play the music. It's very loud, but you'll get the idea of how much hand movement is. And in fact, I am out of breath by the end of the story, and I do yoga every day. So there was a crocodile, and so he chomps. If you haven't heard the song, I strongly recommend it even for first and second graders. They love it. Some of my little guys kind of roll their eyes, but by the end of the song, we're all dancing. Very cute little song. I kind of like that gentleman. He has a lot of really great stuff. So we listen to that song. We might listen to another if time permits. And I always ask because you always want to ask those students, can I play the Monster Mash? Can we play the Baby Shark song? Usually I get a yes, but sometimes I get a no. So I have a really successful story to tell you. I've been doing this for a while and it was just so challenging. Nothing was working. We had to change time frames. We had to figure stuff out. I had one little guy who was actually playing in the Duplo blocks. He would just strip down, take everything off, jump on tables. He just did not want to participate in anything at all. And it was just really, really distracting for the other students. And I just was drained out by the end of the day just from that 30-minute experience. But I started doing the pet cards, I started doing the songs, and I was just staying with it. And I turned around one day to flip this over to it's now for story time. And when I turned around, all of my students were sitting in that semicircle. And it was just that moment that I thought, oh my gosh, this is actually working. And I didn't cry, but I wanted to because I couldn't believe that I finally made it to be something consistent and something that the kids understood that what we were doing. So after story time, this is what my students get to pick. They get to pick reading center blocks. The computer is Starfall, or they can go into small groups with their speech therapist and her aide. Again, I worked really hard for that. It was several years for that to even come into development, and it's been very successful. I do have one student that doesn't like to sit with all the kids. He likes to look and stare at the pictures and flip through the books. It's something special for him. And then most of the students all go to the block center. And then we kind of encourage them. Would you like to do Starfall now? Would you like to go work with the speech therapist, Miss Jennifer? And then I have Starfall readily available, and then I can just click on that and it pulls it up. All right, I left plenty of room for some questions. If anybody has any questions for me, please let me know. And I'll try and answer them the best I could. All right. If we don't have any questions, I'd like to show you the resources that I do have available for you. Let me go back to sharing my screen. And we will go back to what is available to you. As I was creating this slideshow, I just put everything in my Padlet. So this is picture book recommendations. A lot of the picture books will have bright colors, mostly primary, and some activities that I found on Pinterest. Pinterest has been amazing. And the benefit of all of this is that it goes really well with first and second grade, or if you see kindergartners. I don't see kindergartners. I didn't mean to leave them out, but it works great for kindergarten also. And then let's see if I can get down here into this Padlet. There we go. So my sensory storytime slides are here. Baby sign language is here, that little video of the sensory overload, some of the manuals that I found through ASL, and some other resources that are out there for us. And I'll be honest with you, like 5 years ago, none of this stuff existed in an extent. It was just very brief, very mild, and it didn't incorporate a lot of things that we use today. And you just got to see what works best for you. Not everything's going to work, and just trying to figure it out is probably my best advice if you're having a really hard time with this population. All right, I think I'm good. How are we doing on time?
We have about 9 minutes left.
Oh, wow. Okay. I was like so worried that I was going to go
We're doing
over. I
great.
kind of
There
rushed
was a
through it. Go
there
ahead.
was a question. What book titles stand out for you that they respond to?
Oh, I just found, oh my goodness, I can't remember his name right now. The watermelon book. The watermelon seed, that one the kids loved. And then I share a book all the time. I thought I put it in here, but I think I took it out as I was updating. I don't see it here. Oh, there it is. The Dear Zoo book. It's hilarious how much they just think it's, they don't even touch the book. I just open up the flap and they discover the animal and I'm able to interact with them and say, what sound does this animal make? And they just think it's hilarious. And then I also that day will bring out my little plastic animal from the zoo and let them pick which one they want to hold for story time that day. I'm still trying to figure that out, how it's going to change when we come back to school, because a lot of this is tactile stuff. They want to hold, they want to feel it. And I don't know how that's going to work out with our distance learning on campus. So I'd like the watermelon seed. I thought I had that on here and I think it is on this one here. Some really good books on these Padlets that I've used ritually and found a lot of good resources. Primary colors is a huge factor in quite a bit of their story times. Yeah, I thought I put it on there, but I'll go. I just discovered him. Let's see who wrote the watermelon seed. I just did this one. Ooh, I know how to spell. Oh, maybe not. All right, I'll put that on the Padlet,
There's
but the watermelon seed. Oh,
somebody put
thank
it in the
you.
chat. Greg
Yeah,
Pizzoli.
Pizzoli, Greg Pizzoli. Almost all of his books have been hits, all of them. I only have about 5 here, but all of his books have been really wonderful. And there's a couple of other ones that the kids really liked that I thought I put down at the bottom here. I'll have to find it. I'll update it because I just discovered them myself. Um, a Max, the little monster Max, that one's been really good too. Just stuff that makes them laugh. Ribbit, I've used Ribbit. I used Ribbit twice actually because it was such a fun book for them. Go Away, Big Green Monster. That's a great resource book to add that STEM activity of painting a monster. You could put a printout. I use cardstock, but you could put that printout in a plastic bag with some green and purple shaving cream in there. Oh, Pete the Cat. Anything Pete the Cat. And you know what? I didn't mention, but I've actually created little cars for like this one was a truck story. I just put them on popsicle sticks. And I actually held these up during my virtual story times, but when I'm there in person, I let them hold them up and we make the sounds of the dump truck or people. And then I also use felt stories if I can. This is which one is this one? There was an old lady who swallowed a fly, and I have the students put this, they'll hold on to the little items and put them onto my felt board. I did this virtually and I didn't think it was going to be a big hit and it was. Just me doing it was enough for them to have some type of connection with the book. All right. I'm going to stop share my screen here. There we go. See if I can look at the chat. Okay. Greg Pizzoli. Yes, thank you. So I will give a little bit of background. I was in Escondido for a while and I was in a 1900 built school. And so they created a cafeteria back in the 80s and they half the cafeteria. So half of the space was library space and half of the space was the lunch area. Super, super tiny, super small. Everything was outdated. I was there for 3 years with no budget. So I did everything on my own. I didn't even have a screen for projection. I was just very limited on my resources. And I just toughed it through. And I thought I was going to stay there forever because I loved my environment. I loved my school. And I kind of created this little tiny family. Well, a position came up here in Temecula and a friend of mine told me you got to apply for this and I was super scared. I didn't want to leave my school and I ended up coming here and I had an amazing new family. I had new space, I had a new principal. Everything was just amazing. And I feel like I earned it. I toughed it through, and I don't take it for granted because I know what it's like to not have a budget and be in a really small area with no resources. But thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Have a good session for the rest of the day for sure.